This is a digital multimeter. It's a marvel of electronics. We can use it to measure so many different things in our circuits. It can be used to measure voltage, current, resistance, capacitance, just to name a few. The main dial at the center is not only the on-off switch, now it's set to off, you can see, but it also picks the function that we want. So when we turn it to the first location, we're measuring voltage, but that little sine wave over the V tells us we're measuring AC voltage. And if we flip it one more, the solid line over the V tells us we're measuring DC voltage. And if we're measuring small voltages, millivolts, there's a special setting on that, and that gives us extra decimal places here so we can get a more accurate reading for small voltages. The Greek letter omega is the symbol we use for ohms, so that's the unit for resistance. So this measures resistance. And the A is for measuring amps. And this sine wave tells us we're measuring AC amps, and the horizontal line tells us we're measuring DC amps here. You have to be careful with this multimeter. It requires a different input for some of the things we're measuring. So the common input, the reference, is the same for everything. But if you're measuring volts or ohms, we use this input. And if we're measuring amps, we use this input. The digital display gives us a lot of information. This particular unit auto scales, so if I put it on ohms and measure a resistance that's very small, it'll give me a number 50 ohms. But if I put a 50,000 ohm resistor on there, it'll still read 50 here, but then it'll say kilo ohms on the side here. So you have to be careful when you're using it, make sure you know what scale it's set to. Right now, the OL means it's over limit. It's too big a number because there's nothing connecting here. This is an infinite resistance. Let's measure the resistance of a few different resistors. So you can see I'm putting my input in where it's asking for the ohm measurement. I'm set to ohms, and I'm going to use, these are very convenient for snapping onto a wire, clipping onto a wire. And this looks like a 10 ohm resistor. There's also a color code on these resistors. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. This resistor is a little bit bigger. It's about 300 ohms, and I'm being careful to keep an eye on the units here. It's telling me it's ohms. Now I'm going to find one that's a little bit bigger, slightly larger resistance, and it says 0.9, but you have to be careful because it's auto scaled, and now it's reading in kilo ohms instead of ohms. So this is 0.9 kilo ohms, which is 900 ohms.